Welcome to the beautiful city of Athens, the gateway to the Tennessee Valley, a city rooted in deep community relationships and built on a rich tradition of small local business and the very best of the human spirit. As Athens embraces the future, the signs of progress are in full bloom. Join us as we discover the bright spots in this charming southern city that we call home. This is Hometown Heartbeat, Athens.
Hi, guys.
What's going on, everybody? Zach Walker, Molly Teasley here with Hometown Heartbeat. How is everyone I almost said this morning. It's been one of those days. We are... What? There's something funky going on in my ears there.
I heard it, too. It was a little...
Huh. That's the Ricky remix. No, so what's going on, everybody? We are just checking in on another day here of Hometown Heartbeat here from Cotton Row Studios, trying to find out some information for you guys on the payroll protection program, the CARES Act. I mean, try to figure out what's going on with all that. I know that we've had our own unique experience, which we're more than happy to talk about and share kind of how that's gone. But I'm interested to see if anybody out there is dealing with this, if there's other small business owners that have been dealing with this that have some input that they could maybe share with their experience trying to collect on the payroll protection program. KR Hooks just joining us. What's going on, buddy? You talk about the smartest man in sporting goods. That's him right there out in Rockwall, Texas. Shout out to KR. Guys, look, it's been forever.
Mm-hmm.
Name that movie.
Don't remember. Couldn't tell you.
KR knows. KR answered that. Forever. I'm not gonna say it. I'm gonna wait and make somebody else say it, because if nobody knows this, then I've failed, and I'll consider my life a failure for maybe the rest of time. My son would know the answer to that question. That would be The Sandlot.
Can't say I've seen it.
Can't say it.
I know it.
As of tomorrow, we'll be taking applications for office manager position. So I mean, look, this thing is obviously something that no one saw coming. We were talking about that today, and how as a company, Keith. You guys all know Keith. My partner Keith Rowe, who has some underlying health conditions, and so we made a decision early on in the process, like, hey, you need to be safe. We need to keep you locked away, and we'll talk through that here in a minute, because I do want to talk through that process, the whole what it looks like to truly be protective and protect yourself and protect your family. But we made those decisions early on, and we had just hired you at the time. So literally, you come into our company, you're here for a week, and then it's like, boom, coronavirus. Yeah. And so, I can't say how thankful I am for you being here with us during this, because honestly, like, this is something that if you're a business owner, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or maybe if you are maybe losing your job or your companies. I mean, it's not just business owners that are dealing with it, but certainly there's a different level of stress on those who are trying to make sure that their people get paid and yada, yada, yada. So, it's certainly been a weird time for both of us. We've never lived through anything like this. Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm just curious to take all the decisions out of it. Connor, by the way, everyone say hello to Connor. I skipped that part. Connor's here. Say hello, Connor.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Hey, we got 3 words today. Good deal. I'm going to pull Connor out so he can do his job. But no, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. 2 very different viewpoints. We're not that far apart in age, but definitely I would say, like, you're one side of our age group bracket, and I'm the top side of our age group bracket. And so, because we both unfortunately fit into the millennial category, which I don't tell many people that, but
I feel like a lot of times we get a bad rap for
that's probably because we deserve a bad rap.
Generations below us, though, behind us.
No, I don't think so. I think the large majority of our generation is an embarrassment. There's a huge entitled streak. You're talking about the first generation of people who everyone got a trophy. You're talking about the first generation of people who Mom, you were a teacher, so you can speak to this. Mommy and Daddy think that little Johnny, even though he only got a 67, he deserves to be rounded up to a 70 so he could get a C just because he's cute.
I think that's way worse now than it was when we were young, though, because I feel like...
No, it is. But our generation, I say ours. It wasn't me. My parents raised me with I literally spent my entire high school career grounded. Like, I didn't leave my house for 4 years. because I forgot to take the trash out once when I was 8. So, no, I'm kidding. But, no, we were, the millennials were the first generation of the everybody gets a trophy. And I'm 33, so we're the back end of that.
Right.
And you're
26.
So you're probably more towards the middle of that. But, I mean, you've told me stories about college roommates and different things that are just – I did not have that experience. Nobody I knew did. And so there's certainly –
concepts of accountability and – I guess responsibility when it comes to money was something that I was taught at a young age. I always had a budget per se of things that I could buy at the store, like $5 of things can be things that you want. And it's like basically you can pick one thing. And then my dad would schedule out the day of, this is what you're doing chore wise from 8 a.m. to 9:15. And then from 9:15 to, 10 o'clock, then you're doing this chore. And I feel like that structure was really important for me in just learning work ethic to the point now where I'm almost like a workaholic because I just expect that my day is going to be structured that way. And I like to structure my life that way. And I don't know if everybody had that experience, but it's possible. But I don't think, unfortunately, learning about money, learning about managing your money and managing your time is not something that you are taught as a child.
Well, no, and there's another thing about it that Austin Smith joining. What's up, Austin? How are you, buddy? I got your message. I just haven't had a chance to reply. Sorry, I'm a jerk. But no, that's part of it. Certainly was like each individual person is going to have a different experience based on how they were raised, how their parents were. But as a whole, back to my main point, I would say that the millennial generation, in large part, is we talk about a vocal minority a lot. That's something that's a phrase that I use often. And I would say that it's much easier to get first of all, stereotypes happen for a reason. Stereotypes happen because you earn them in action in a lot of ways. I'm not saying they're all fair. I'm not saying they're all happen that way, but in a lot of they are, but in a lot of ways, stereotypes are earned by behavior. And in a lot of ways, I'm not saying that's not a blanket statement. Save your email. I won't reply. That's not a blanket statement. I'm not talking about all of them. I'm saying in general, a stereotype is earned by your actions in some or a lot, or in my opinion, most cases. That being said, there are a generation of what we would call millennials that the bottom portion of that, which I'm technically a millennial. I think I'm the first year of the millennial, right? So it'd be 33 down to like 20, whatever, 2 or whatever. Yeah. The large part of the smaller side of that, their actions created a stereotype. They are the vocal minority. They're the ones that political correctness means more than common sense. They're the one. I mean, there's just a lot of stereotypes that go with that, and I think a lot of them didn't come out of thin air. And so my whole point in saying that was it was more just to kind of spark conversation. But I would say millennials as a whole probably more often than not deserve what they are labeled in a lot of ways. That's not a fair statement across the board.
It's hard because it's easy to point blame at one group or one person, but then you also got to think collectively who raised that generation of people.
No, but you're taking it too far, though.
No, I know. I'm just thinking of the whole picture.
I got you, but but we're talking about you immediately dive into like this intellectual conversation about like the root of why people act the way they act, and all I'm saying is very very plainly that. Again, stereotypical high level, like a lot of millennials deserve the reputation they have based on the way they act. Okay. And there's tons of influences that go into that. And so that's what you were addressing. It was like, how did people get that way? Was it they were raised this way, they were raised that way, they were whatever. I would just say that I mean, if you look at what I would call the best generation that mankind's ever seen, the World War II veterans.
Yeah, they're called the greatest generation.
They are. Yeah. You know why? Because like they wore a suit and tie to school. Like my uncle he would foregoed. Okay. Is that the right word? I don't know. You're the smart one. Foregoed. So he foregoed his scholarship to Ole Miss to play football to stay in the fields and pick cotton with my family because his mother and father needed him in the fields. And that's not a decision that gets made very often anymore. In a lot of ways, parents, helicopter parents, they fly right in there and they just, little Johnny. Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard about how good little Johnny is at baseball. Little Johnny, he's 8, but he throws 97. Oh yeah. Nick Saban called my 7-year-old tackle football player and said, maybe one day when you're bigger, son, you're going to be Roll Tide Crimson Tide starter. Tua Tagovailoa number 2, and it's just like parents do a lot of this. They create a lot of this stuff, and I think how that all ties back in. A lot of that is they are the ones who are vocal on a lot of social media. They're the ones who they grew up with. I mean, I got Facebook when I was in college. So I was a freshman in college when Facebook. There was also Napster, which none of you know what that is.
I know Napster.
You know Napster? High five. Oh wait, sanitize. High five. High five. But no, that generation has the ability to influence more people than they understand because we are the loudest generation on social media. And so I think a lot of what's happening with COVID-19 and this is a lot of the information you're getting. I mean, we have the generation of share. Influencers are becoming more famous than the celebrities themselves. People are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single non-famous person, just somebody who's pretty or someone who's developed a following or whatever, to share an opinion. Or to share a product, and that's terrifying. And that's so I say all that to kind of shape the argument or shape the concept of like this whole coronavirus thing. A lot of the response to it, a lot of the information that comes out and is shared comes from our generation, because again, we were really the first ones to have Facebook. We're the first ones to learn. I mean, Instagram, I get told all the time that Instagram is like Facebook's for old people, which hurts my heart because like I don't even understand how the old Instabook works. And so in the TikTok thing, I mean, how about that?
Ooh,
how about that?
I love TikTok.
What?
It's so entertaining.
Look at me. Attention.
No,
Dance.
the best comedians right now, I think, are on TikTok. Like all those Netflix, comedy skits that are on there, like they don't even compare to the hilariousness that's on TikTok. So.
I just saw a shot that Connor switched to here a minute ago, and he went to a shot of you listening to me, and you could not have looked more disinterested in anything in the world. That was fantastic. Connor, well played, sir. Well played. I can't imagine what you're going to do when I get you an actual camera switcher, and you can actually be watching in real time what the other cameras have, which, by the way, working on that. But
oh, my gosh. Okay, but there is this book I've been meaning to read, but I don't have kids yet, so I haven't been, pulled to read it. It's called The Gift of Failure, How the best parents learn to let go so their children can succeed. So I think it'll be really interesting to see, or I guess get your opinion on, at what point what parameters do you put on your kids so they don't fail? Because we've been talking about that in terms of, business. We see where there might be errors in the future, and you want to catch that person, or you want to make sure that error doesn't happen. And you probably want to do even on a larger scale for your kids, right? So you don't want...
Go ahead. I was going to go ahead and finish your statement.
You don't want your kid to fail, so you think that you should go to the, ends of the earth to make sure that doesn't happen. But I guess you have to pick your battles, right?
So I couldn't disagree more with that. Okay. So I'm a baseball player, okay? And I love baseball for a lot of reasons. Baseball shaped my life in a lot of ways. Baseball saved my life in a lot of ways. It also defined my life for a lot of years incorrectly. I didn't understand that my worth and my value wasn't tied up in who I was as a baseball player. And so I allowed it to shape my life in a lot of ways too. But what I would say is the reason I love baseball the most, more than anything, is because baseball is a game of failure. So the best baseball players in the world will succeed 70% of the time. I'm sorry, 30% of the time. They will fail 70% of the time. If you fail in baseball at a rate of 70%, you will wind up in the Hall of Fame. And to me, baseball is the only game in the world that will teach you that. And I'm going somewhere with this, so stay with me. If you're a football player and you're Peyton Manning and you only complete 30% of your passes, you never make it out of Pee-wee, right? If you are a basketball player and you only shoot 28, 30% from the field, you're probably not going to make the JV team. In baseball, if you hit a baseball 28% of the time, you are the best player on the team. And so I grew up in a game where failure was something I had to reconcile myself with early. Like I had to become okay with the fact that failure was the more constant than the success.
So you were never like, oh, I should go to school play basketball or soccer.
No, because to me, you know me well enough to know I love to be challenged. Like if I get that was the biggest thing when Keith and I started this business. He knew me well enough and he said, hey man, are you going to get bored? because if I get bored, which I usually get into something, I can get decent at it pretty quick, and then I get bored with it, and then I move on. Real estate is where I landed because there's so many things you can do. You can jump into design, you can jump into construction, you can jump into a lot of things and stay busy. But baseball was a constant challenge. Baseball and golf are the only two things in my life that I've ever really stuck with as a sports wise, because you can never get good enough to not fail. Like there's always, you can be a little bit better. A tenth of a point better is going to make you so much better as a player. So I say all that to answer your question about my son. I hope that my son fails early and often in life.
I think that's what this book is saying.
But you're asking, what do I put around my son to protect him from failure? And where I would say, like, I think of it like bowling, right? When you go bowling and you take a kid bowling, you put bumpers down the sides, and you let them just bounce from side to side, side to side. Everybody else has to roll the ball right down the middle, because if you go off the edge of the lane, it's catastrophic, right? You don't get any points. So in the game, it's catastrophic. With my son, my goal, and with the way I try to parent, the way my wife and I have tried this, and don't get me wrong, like we're not very good at it most days, but we try real hard, is like it's the bowling concept. So we want to insulate, but not isolate.
Right.
Like we want to insulate them from the types of things, like my son's going to break his arm. My son's going to bust his head wide open, because I want him to go out and try things. And when I tell him not to do that, he's hard-headed like his mother, not like me, like his mother. And he's going to do what I told him not to do. He's going to bust his head wide open. He's going to break his arm. Like that type of stuff. I want him to fail in those ways. Where I want him to be prepared is where I failed. My problem was I failed when I was 21, 22, 23 years old, and I failed with legal problems. I failed with poor decisions of drug and alcohol abuse. I failed in areas where because maybe I wasn't thinking accurately about maybe like the parameters of things, or like kind of and I'm trying not to get too specific, but like I hope my son fails in the areas where it doesn't matter, but teaches him lessons.
Ashley said, "Excuse me."
Oh, well, sorry, babe. I must have misspoke. But no, I want my son to fail in areas where the ramifications are minor. They're a broken arm. They're a cast. They're some kind of physical ailment. I mean, real consequences. But where I failed, it changed my life. Like my decisions created a paper trail, if you will, right? Pointing back to my bad decisions. And so my whole thing is keeping my son insulated from the big one. Like the big mistake in baseball, we call the big mistake is the pitcher when he leaves the ball up over the middle of the plate and it's a tie ball game and the guy bangs the ball 400 yards or 400 feet down the right field line to win a ball game. It's a home run. That's the big. Don't make the big mistake. Miss small, miss low, miss. And so that's my whole concept with parenting.
Yeah.
So it's all about like I want to facilitate failure in the areas where my son can learn and grow from it now before it like impacts his life on a grand scale. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation because in the Atlanta Monster, that podcast I'm listening to, they're talking about how before then, this happened in about 1988, the late 80s, when Wayne Williams, I think is his name, started, kidnapping kids and killing them. And at that time, when it started becoming more publicized, people started not letting their kids be out after dark, and there was almost a curfew, and if they caught a kid outside, they would pick them up in their police car and take them home and then fine the parent would get a ticket and for letting their kid be out after dark. And so then at that point it became the parents would go with the teenagers everywhere because they were afraid that if they weren't with their kid, then their kid could get kidnapped. And I feel like that's very justifiable, but also takes away some autonomy for the teenager, right? So when it comes to COVID-19, and you're talking about the safety of your family, I feel like it's a similar concept of how much do I need to insulate the situation, not let my kid go out so that, they don't potentially die. It's a similar concept as what happened with the Atlanta Monster in that whole podcast, but I don't know.
Well, the whole themes all apply, right? So we're talking about how do we protect from failure, and I'm talking about the big one. What's the big failure? Well, in the context of what we're talking about here, COVID-19. Let's circle back to that because I have a couple things that I want to address there in terms of freedom of religion, religious freedom. I mean, like the draconian, as some people are calling it, measure some cities are taking to restrict travel and enterprise and all those things. Again, not address. We'll get there in a minute, but the concept of protection, insulation versus isolation, right? Like that's the difference in me and Keith. Keith is isolating. Like he is, because he is at risk, because he's in a category where if he gets this, it would be potentially catastrophic for him. He's isolating, meaning he told me this morning, and he goes, like, his routine, he goes to Bojangles every morning. He gets the same thing. He's been doing it.
I'm surprised he's very skinny for going to Bojangles every
He was
day.
taking it to his mom and dad. I mean, it's just something he's been a part of his life forever, right? And so when this whole thing hit, like he told me this morning, he was like, bro, this will probably shake you, but like I'm so committed to this. I've not been to Bojangles since this whole thing started. Wow. And like to me, like that'd be like me saying like, I haven't been to Jack's, or I stopped breathing for all intents and purposes, because that's kind of what he does every day. Yeah. And so insulation versus isolation, I think that gets us to where we're at today. Now the conversation is shifting towards, okay, the curve is flattening. And what that means, just so everybody understands, it does not mean that there are not new cases. It means that the exponential growth has flattened, has turned the corner, and now we're on the downside of the caseload is not growing exponentially every day. It doesn't mean we won't have new cases. It means we're going to have less new cases today than we had yesterday. And that's going to be not just a one-day thing, but a pattern, right? And so once we have a week of that, we can say, okay, we're on the downside.
Let these people out, and then it'll go back up a little bit, and then I don't know, we're going to have to go
back in. Will
it
go back up? I don't know that it will.
I'll be curious, because I feel like there'll be a big upset. Let's say we go out, and I would assume that people are going to be getting sick again, not necessarily exponentially, but just you could see an uptick, like why you're interacting more, so there's going to be people getting sick. So just like the common flu and the cold, so we might see it come back up, and I don't know what our response is going to be. Are we going to go back to a stay-at-home order if it starts exponentially going back up?
When they turn this thing loose, that's the decisions that are being made. Those are the decisions that are being made right now. Like those are the conversations happening with politicians behind closed doors. The federal government comes out and says, hey, state, you guys start making your own, like you can use our guidelines, but start making plans to get your government back open, get your economies back open. And so the reality is, when that uptick, if that uptick happens, I don't know that I think it will. I think it might slightly, but it's not. I think there's a lot more research coming out now saying this has probably been here since December. Okay, I've read 3 or 4 new articles on the last couple of days that are all pointing towards. I'm not saying it's a fact. Don't hear me saying this is that, but what I've read is saying there's some pretty good arguments that this may have been here since December. If that's the case, a tremendous amount of herd immunity has been built up. This goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning. I would love to be able to test everyone in the country right now, just to get a real snapshot of how many people, like you and I, have we had it? Do we already have the antibodies in our system?
Right.
We'll never know that, and I get that.
$50, and then we can know.
Well, if I can pay $50, I'll pay it right now.
Yeah, I think you can right now.
Well, hot dog. Well, I'll let you guys. How quickly do I get the results? Can I let everybody know by the end of the week if I've already had it?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, then you know what? For the sake of the show, I'll be paying $50 to find out if I've had it, because I'm willing to bet you the same $50 that I already have, because I was so sick in December I thought I was going to die. Like I'm like, it was January, but I was like, I don't get the flu. I don't get sick. Anyways, I say all that to say that, like, insulating versus isolating, protection, like, we've taken a bunch of steps. Those steps have worked. The curve has been flattened. For all intents and purposes, we've crossed the hump and started the downside. And like you said, now the questions become, as we begin to assimilate or reopen, like, what is our prepared response when a week after we open, cases spike? If they spike, what do we do then? And I'll tell you what we do. We keep the people that are at risk safe, and we keep going about our business, or else we'll never get over this. We read that article last week from the guy that said the only way to kill a respiratory virus like this is herd immunity. Now, whether or not that's an absolute fact or it's the only way, if we're going to wait for a freaking shot, we're going to wait for 18 months, 12 to 18 months. That's not going to happen. There's no way, because that would be Operation Thunderdome. And so the question becomes, in between, what do we do, right? And so I think
people should just go out and be, with hand sanitizer, maybe wearing a mask if they feel that so inclined. Yeah, and maybe wear gloves if they want to. Don't throw them on the ground in the grocery store parking lot, please. I've seen so many gloves on the ground. It's nasty. And I've also seen people that work at Publix be like, upset.
Well, let's talk about that for a second.
Why are you throwing your gloves on the ground?
Let's talk about personal protective equipment. Okay, this is a conversation I've been having with my wife and with some other friends that are dealing with some of this. Like, you people don't understand how this stuff works. Like, gloves are a one-use single-use disposable item.
Well, I guess if you could hand
Okay.
sanitize them, right?
Gloves are a one-use, single-use disposable item.
Okay.
So in theory, the way it's supposed to happen is yes, you use your gloves, you touch one surface, and then you dispose of your gloves, and then move on to the next thing that you're doing, right? Yes, in theory, you could hand sanitize your gloves, but there's a lot of risk in that. I mean, these gloves are going to be more porous than, I mean, it just.
You're right, yeah.
So I say all that. Masks. Masks, if you've worn your mask and then you take your mask off, the minute you take your mask off, your mask is done. It goes in the trash can. They are a disposable, single-use item. So anyone who's taking their mask, they're wearing it out in public. Now, I get it. If you only have one mask, is it better than not having any mask? I don't know. Ask the CDC. I'm not smart enough to make that call. But I will tell you that the way masks are made and the way that they're supposed to be used, you wear them. The outside of the mask is what catches all of the contagion or the virus. The minute you dispose of that mask, it needs to be disposed of, not hanging on your mantle to be worn tomorrow, because that mask is sitting there holding the virus that you're trying to keep out of your house. Right. So if it's just sitting in your car, just sitting there festering for all intents and purposes, it's not doing any good. And so the concept of protection, insulate, isolate, all that stuff, like, I get it and I understand where everybody's at on it, but it's not how it works. Like, we got to do this a little bit smarter if we're going to do it. So
something I've been encouraged by, I think this morning I heard on the news, they were talking about how they are now bringing these mask sterilizer, like UV light sanitizer boxes into hospitals so that they can be sanitizing their N95 masks instead of using them one time, which is encouraging because now potentially healthcare workers won't be running out of protective,
that would be a huge
equipment.
help.
Yeah. So I'm excited to hear about that, and hopefully they actually get distributed.
Connor, if you can throw a graphic up, I don't know if you can with your remote production, but if you could throw something up about religious freedom, what is our religious freedom? Let's discuss religious freedom in this country right now. And so I want to bring to you an article that is not an opinion; it's absolutely a fact. Okay, and it is something that happened in Mississippi this weekend. I don't know if you've read about it.
Okay, we have a comment.
What's our comment?
Julie says, we need to have controlled COVID parties like we used with the chicken pox. This way we won't overwhelm the hospitals, slowly expose, excluding the high-risk groups. Question is, do you trust the quote-unquote cure that hasn't had testing for long-term effects?
I don't think there is a cure. I think the cure right now...
Like if there was a vaccine.
So the cure right now is herd immunity. It's the only certified legitimate cure, right? It's those who don't have underlying conditions and predisposition to a much worse infection. The cure is just time. It's like a flu, right? It's like a really rough flu. The question then is, do you trust a cure that may have some that hasn't had testing for long-term effects? My answer would be no. I think there are other ways to treat this. I think the antibody treatment is going to become the most effective. I don't know why we wouldn't explore that more than a vaccine. Like, if you take there's some science out there that this antibody treatment, they're taking the antibodies from healthy people who their body took the virus, beat the virus. They're taking those antibodies, which that's exactly what would fight the disease in your body, and they're giving them to a test number of patients right now. Right, and then they're exposing, these patients are then being exposed and seeing, we're seeing what happens, right? Or they're already exposed or whatever. I think that's the best cure that we could ever come up with. I also believe that this is going to be, it's kind of being proven right now. They're not quite all the way there. They're not saying it like it's a slam dunk fact, but it does seem to be that at 83 degrees, the virus acts a little bit, it's not quite as bad as in the cooler weather. And so heat will affect this in some capacity. It's going to be more of a cold weather type thing. At least, what's the crazy face for?
No, I'm just listening.
You make a crazy face. That's her face when she doesn't believe what I'm saying, even though I know what I'm talking about. It's like,
I just feel like some people think that hot weather kills viruses.
Well, there's a lot of stuff out there right now that says 83 degrees is killing this virus. Like if you put what's a petri dish? You put it in a petri dish under a microscope and you expose it to heat, the virus is dying. So some would say that would show very clearly that the virus reacts to heat. So I'm not saying they're not coming out saying like, oh, get everybody in a tanning bed and we'll kill the thing. But I certainly believe that it is going to be heat very well may be a factor in this thing moving forward. So Alabama's finna say, hold my beer and watch this, and let's see what happens in about 2 weeks when it's 104.
Yeah. My understanding of like how the common cold works, it happens a lot more during the winter and the spring and the fall because kids are in school really close to each other during those times, and then in the summer they're not interacting as much and they're not in a closed room with 30 other individuals. So it's less common during the summer, not necessarily because it's warm in the summer, but because they're not around as many people in the summer. But I mean, if there's research coming out showing that it gets somehow
quite a bit
killed with heat, then I'm not going to deny that. But I just feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah, no, there are. So definitely, like I do, verify what you read before you regurgitate it. So like I said, 83 degrees. No, but there are a lot of things. I mean, look, I didn't just pull this out of my tail and just say, let's see.
No, I'm sure you didn't. But the person,
83.
The person
83
that wrote
sounds
it
good.
might have.
But the 5 people that wrote the same thing from various parts of the world with various levels of research all seem to agree. So anyways, again, I'm not saying that it's going to, I mean, no one's saying that it's an absolute fact right now, but they are saying that when you put the thing in a Petri dish, it does react differently in heat. So all that to say that, like, I think this whole thing is going to slow down with the antibodies, the herd immunity. Like, herd immunity is the number one thing right now that is the only sure thing, right? Is getting, somebody said the chickenpox parties or whatever, right? Like getting people exposed, getting them through it, I truly believe that I've been exposed to it. I know for a fact that I was in contact with someone who has been tested positive, right? And so there was a period where I was a little more cautious and wanted to make sure that we got through, and I called you and told you, hey, here's, just so you know, I never exhibited the first symptom. And so I very well may have been asymptomatic, but I did what I was supposed to do and kind of keep that locked into a small group. But I say all that to say that this thing is we're on the downside of it. So now let's talk about the back end and what everything looks like coming out of it. So what I wanted to talk to you about was this Mississippi church where congregants were ticketed for going to a drive-in service. Okay. And so what happened? Let me pull up, I had the article pulled up, and then I had to pull my research back out to make sure that my summer heat comment didn't go unsubstantiated by fact. Let's see.
Looking at it too.
Mississippi Church.
I'm looking for your fact. I have not found it, but
that doesn't surprise me.
But I will continue to look.
Liberal.news.gov might not have it.
I'm looking at a health website.
So let's see here. Boom. Governor Reeves on Greenville. So in Greenville, local law enforcement showed up to this church service. They did a drive-in church service, okay? And so at this church service, that's what Lindsay Lane did it the other day, right? They have the pastor and the worship team and all that, and they were all like, it goes through an FM transmitter. So in your car, windows rolled up, self-contained, your family unit. Okay, so the same people that you live with and breathe their air and use their bathrooms and all that, you're in a completely sealed place. You go to the church. They had cones, so you could only park in every other space. So even if you did roll your windows down, you're more than 6 feet away from somebody, which you weren't allowed to roll your windows down. They monitored that. Cops showed up and ticketed every single car. They ticketed their car.
Mm-hmm.
So
I did hear about that.
So the church sued the government.
There's a church in California doing the same thing.
Mississippi church sues police after congregants ticketed during drive-in service. So I want to, before I read you this article, I want to get your opinion. So were they because look, I'm all about religious freedom. I'm all about all that, but I'm also about some level of like, be reasonable, be responsible. As a church, we don't need to be out there, just banging down the doors just to be confrontational. Like we need to be smart and wise. So that being said, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, was the city right, wrong? I mean, I just want to hear your views since we are.
It's tricky because what I've read is the state's justification for that was because they're allowing church services online. They're not limiting the people's freedom to, express religion, participate in religion, practice. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, I'm glad I'm not the one having to make that decision. But I feel like It's a hard call to make. I don't know if I feel like it is limiting their civil liberties for sure.
Okay.
But I don't know if you have to trust that people are going to go out of their way to stay 6 feet apart. And I don't know, even if you were to let them go into the church per se, or in the parking lot, do you need to regulate that? Do you need to make sure you have X's on the ground like they do in Lowe's?
Okay, so I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that because I want to address that too. We can go to Walmart and park right next to one another and take absolutely no precaution other than hoping the Walmart greeter is doing his part to keep everyone 6 feet apart. Like, think about this.
Right.
We got no problem with that.
Yeah, it's not that different.
But we can't drive into a church service. Nobody even gets out of their car. We're talking about staying in their car. You can go to Walmart, or if you want to get Lowe's, get some mulch 5 for $10. Like, you can roll up there and pack in there like I'm talking about, just pack in there, and that's no problem.
Right.
And so, so and we're running out of time, so we're going to move through this quickly. But today the department filed the statement of interest. So basically the Department of Justice has filed their statement of interest in support of the church. The city, let's see here. Where is the city appears to have thereby singled churches out as the only essential service, as designated by the state of Mississippi, that may not operate despite following all CDC and state recommendations regarding social distancing. And so that's a big statement.
Do you feel like, you probably interact with more church leaders than I do. So do you feel like they take that personally, like the government is going out of their way to try and get Christians out of, or
no, I don't think they
discriminate against Christians, or do you feel like they're just overreacting?
No, I don't think they took it personally. I think that the city did go out of their way to get. I mean, that's what the Department of Justice just stepped in and said. Mm-hmm. They said that the state of Mississippi only singled out one. That'd be one entity on the entire essential business list. They went to churches, even though they followed every protocol as given to them by the CDC. And so I think that was a huge blow to the big government, and I think it was a win for churches all over the place. Now, also, don't be that idiot that wants to have in-person church service just because you feel like you can or should or whatever.
That's still regulating it. You're still making them to just be
no.
in the parking lot.
No one's allowed to have more than 10 people together. Right? Even in Walmart and all that, you're supposed to follow guidelines. Now, most churches, I would say, are willing to say, you know what, for the better good of the people, to be smart and to be conscious of our community and care about our community, we're willing to go online and drive in because we don't want to be a part of the problem. We don't want to be part of the cause here. Okay? And so when they did a drive-in on Easter and they followed every rule and guideline, and the Lowe's is full of people and the church is full of people, both people should be ticketed. Only the church gets ticketed. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like the grounds for ticketing were available to, you could have gone to 4 or 5 businesses in Mississippi at that given moment and handed out the exact same ticket, but yet they only did it to the church, which is why I think the Department of Justice stepped in. It was more about saying, hey guys, like we have limited their ability. Like, they can do the online service, and they're agreeing to that. They're not fighting back. Most of them aren't. The ones that are stupid, in my opinion, right now. I mean, I think there's a level of responsibility that we all have in trying to flatten the curve and be smart and be responsible. I'm probably like the least loving this thing than anybody. Like, I probably fight against it more than anything. And I'm sitting here saying, like, that's fine. We'll go online. We'll do what it takes to reach people that way. But for that to be targeted in that way, I'm glad the Department of Justice stepped in.
So was the justification for the ticket because there were more than 10 people in the proximity?
No, because the governor just declared we ban drive-in churches.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
in Mississippi too. Like, you would think maybe California or like there's some other cities or states where maybe you would be less surprised, but like that's the buckle of the Bible Belt.
Well, some churches in San Bernardino, which is in California,
Go ahead.
The landlords. So a lot of these churches, as you know, they don't necessarily own churches. They don't necessarily own the building that they're in. Yeah. So a lot of the landlords of the buildings that they are meeting in change the locks in San Bernardino. So the church leadership or whoever workers actually couldn't go in. But in theory, they could probably still meet in the parking lot. But
how do they produce their live stream?
They're also suing for
they should
for that reason.
Well, they should, because the rules state less than 10 people.
What it shows is a mistrust to me. Like you don't trust the churches to do what's right and what's safe, which I don't know. Like
did they do the same thing to Lowe's?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It shows mistrust in them versus the corporate world. But I'm just trying to justify whether or not that mistrust is founded. I don't want to say that it is, but there are also some people in that group are also the ones that don't vaccinate their kids. So I understand where the mistrust is originating from. I don't know if it's justified, obviously, because all sorts of people go to church. And I don't know if it's up to the government to decide who they trust and who they don't, Yeah. So I mean, personally, if you're gonna let them meet in the parking lot, then you might as well let them meet in the building.
No, you're right.
Why restrict them?
You shouldn't restrict them at all. Look, guys, this one we were just going to do a little quick one because we were late today, and here we are 40 minutes later.
Oh,
as usual, it's been a blast hanging out with you today. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for chiming in. We'll be back tomorrow. I should have a guest on tomorrow. I'm not going to tell you who it is just yet because, I don't want to put Bradley Cooper out there. I'm kidding. Yeah, I hear you. I wouldn't be able to get a word in. Molly would be over here just eating the camera. So, guys, look, we love you guys. We look forward to talking to you tomorrow. As always, if you need anything, reach out anytime. Connor, take it away, my friend.